Hello everyone, my name is David Foltz. I'm a senior malacologist and astacologist at Edge Engineering and Science, and today I will be giving you a talk on utilizing opportunistic data in order to aid in the recovery of a federally threatened crayfish species, a case study for the first biological opinion issued for the Big Sandy Crayfish, Cambarus Callainus. The title is a bit of a mouthful. It was a very large and expansive project that took up the past 3 to 4 years of my life. And we're going to go down through it. So let's meet the species. This is a photo of Cambarus Callainus, the Big Sandy Crayfish, and to be fair, this animal had just molded and hardened up, so the colors are popping a little bit more than usual. And this is where they're known from. You have the Lavisa Fork Basin in Virginia, Tug Fork, which spans West Virginia, Virginia, and Kentucky, and Russell Fork in Kentucky and Virginia. For the species background, for the sake of the time constraints for this talk, we're going to skip over some of this, but if you guys have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them at the end regarding this. So for the basic project background, there was a bridge replacement project for Norfolk Southern Rail Company that was to be conceptualized and implemented. This happened in 2017, and it was determined that they needed to perform surveys for bats, crayfish, and mussels prior to the project moving forward. So here's a picture of the bridge, and here's a downstream photo of the river we're working on, the Tug Fork. As you can see, it's pretty wide and fairly deep. And long story short, we went out, we conducted the surveys for the 3 types of animals. We didn't get any hits for bats, didn't get any for mussels. We did collect 2 individuals of the Big Sandy Crayfish, which triggered formal consultation. Fast forward a little bit, BO is issued for the project and the field work starts in 2019. Just to re-emphasize the survey efforts, BO was issued for the salvage efforts performed in 2019, and a revised BO was issued for salvage efforts which were continued in 2020. And the methodology, we were to survey for all available habitat via seine hauls for the first 2 downstream riffles prior to in-stream work, and then repeat these efforts every 10 days until in-stream work was complete. And then from that, the first 50 Big Sandy Crayfish collected through the survey were brought into captivity and housed for the life of the project until the bridge was installed. That way they weren't crushed or killed, which is take. And then any crayfish collected after that number was to be elastomer tagged, which is any that we found after that. And then the first 15 that were large enough were to be radio tracked and released downstream of the construction area. And then a second round of salvage and sampling was planned for 2020 to remove the old structures of the original bridge once the new bridge was put in place. So for our survey efforts, we conducted these 15 times, 11 in 2019 and 4 in 2020, and the surveys advanced alongside of construction, so we could kind of see the bridge being built as we went. And our collection methods also advanced as we went because, like many things that are done the first time ever, there were unforeseen circumstances and things didn't go as planned. So here's a picture of us sampling for the first time, performing seine haul. Here's what a really good seine haul would look like. You have 2 animals in there. This was an extreme rarity. And then here's a close-up of the animal in the wild. Once we had these animals in place, we would put them in whirl packs filled with water and air, put them in a cooler with water, put some ice in there to keep the temperature low, and then we would drive to White Sulphur Springs or West Liberty University in West Virginia, where they were to be housed in these setups. And then from this, we did this a lot of times, and eventually we flipped every single item in that stream, including the kitchen sink. But as we're doing this, the water is continuously going down, which happens as you go throughout the summer. But 2019 was an unusually dry year, so this happened at an increasing rate. And here you can see the original stream gauge we put in to kind of determine if we'd be able to do the surveys. And when we started, we were up here. And as you can see, we're now down almost 2.5 feet from the original water we were sampling at. So the stream's quite low. Then we'll go through some photos of the bridge being built out really quick. So you have initial like surveys being performed. Then you have the causeway, the bridge being built out for the crane to come out to take these out. Also, barges being put in so that this can be put in to drive the cofferdam in. Then you have a silt boom right here to catch all the sediment. And this was kind of the end result of the first year. Cofferdam's in place, barges are there. You can't see the crane up here, but they can start taking stuff out. And then going back to surveys, as we're going throughout the year, the water's getting lower and lower. This large rock right here originally housed one of the largest big sandy crayfish we collected on this project and was under 6 inches of water when we started. Now it's quite dry. And as we're going along and doing this every month and we're losing more and more of our sampled habitat, we start noticing all these little burrows here. And since it's edge habitat, you would assume that it would be a secondary burrowing species such as Cambarus hatfieldi, which occurs in the area. However, here we have a video. Because like any good scientist, we decided to investigate this.
That's Callainus.
And as you can see, it was the listed species that was actually using a lot of these burrows. They don't retreat out into the water. They already have these burrow systems down under the rocks they're under, so they just burrow down into them and wait it out. Due to this, we started hand collecting, and eventually the water was so clear and low that we started snorkeling. This started boosting our numbers. But solve one problem, another pops up. Started having an airboat come up the river every time we were down there, and this caused safety issues due to it only being a few seconds before you saw or heard him until he was up near you, so we had to get divers out of the water quick. So we eventually worked out coordinated our schedules so he wasn't running on the days that we were doing the surveys. And then we eventually hit our 50 animals, so here you see me putting an elastomer tag into Big Sandy Crayfish. Here's me putting a radio tag on one. We kind of just use this wetland flagging to hold their limbs in place. That way they wouldn't rip the tag off. So we do this, throw them in a bubbler, let it set. And then this was the end result. Worked out pretty nice. So getting into our results in 2019, 927 seine hauls completed with 52 hours of hand collecting and snorkeling during 11 events. Collected 80 big sandy crayfish in total. 50 were housed at White Sulphur Springs National Fish Hatchery until the holding facility, which was to be built at West Liberty University, was completed, and the animals were transferred thereafter. An additional 21 animals fitted with elastomer tags and 6 fitted with radio tags. Unfortunately, we did have 3 individuals that were killed during the survey. This was expected. The problem with flipping big flat rocks is that sometimes things get crushed. And we didn't have any recaptures of elastomer tagged crayfish. Methodology for 2020, pretty much the same as 2019, except that no more animals in captivity. Anything we collect now gets a elastomer tag, and any crayfish large enough for a radio tag now gets a radio tag. And then additionally, we had to track any tagged crayfish or radio tagged crayfish for 5 intervals after the collection. So if we got animals on the final day, we still had to come down 5 intervals after that for tracking. 2020 results, 254 seine hauls and 9.5 hours of hand collecting and snorkeling during 4 events. 15 Cambarus Callainus collected. All were fitted with elastomer tags and 8 fitted with radio tags, and again, no recaptures of elastomer tagged crayfish. A little bit of our tracking results. So here's from 2019. You have, this is our release area, had a lot of nice habitat there and where we pulled a lot of the first 50 individuals, so we knew this was a good release spot. You have some animals that moved down, then way up, animals that just started moving up, some that just sat in place, so kind of a mixed bag. 2020, more of the same. Here's our release area again. We have downstream movement, and then they just kind of rotate around in a few boulders. Some upstream movement, some way downstream movement, so again, mixed bag. Skip ahead to the release, because keep in mind we brought all these animals into captivity. We have to put them back out. So we released 70 animals. 40 of the original animals were still alive. We unfortunately did have some expire in captivity, but when you house animals that only have a 5 or 6 year lifespan for a year and a half, it's kind of expected that the older ones aren't necessarily going to make it. We did have 30 young that we raised and reared that we released back into the stream, so that was unexpected. So to start this, we went to West Liberty and White Sulphur Springs, got the animals out, put them in the coolers, drove down to the site, checked to make sure they were okay, kind of looked over the site, got a game plan, started marching all the crayfish and gear down, and then once we were suited up, we'd have the students hand us the crayfish and we would put them back under rocks in the stream. And they took to it like champs, went right under the rocks, started pulling into detritus. It was like they never left, which was awesome. Then here's a quick photo of the release crew. So overall results and discussion, we're going to cover habitat utilization, morphometrics, radio tracking, relocation success, and captive rearing. And here's an animal that was released during the release, going back under a rock. So habitat utilization, overall we performed 1,181 seine hauls for this project, which only yielded 35 big sandy crayfish. That's 0.029 per haul catch per unit effort, which is very low. 61.5 hours of hand collecting and snorkeling yielded 60 Callainus, which is almost 1 per hour. And you do have to take into account that we are having diminishing returns during this. As you remove animals over time, your numbers get less and less, but still quite low for the seine haul catch per unit effort. This resulted in the collection of 95 big sandy crayfish, and we learned that the tug fork population does not follow traditional habitat preference and norms for the species. It's well documented that they like to stay in riffles under big flat rocks. We checked the riffles with the big flat rocks. We only got 1 or 2 the entire project, and we kept checking them every interval, and it never changed. They were preferring the edge habitat under the slab boulders, down under multiple layers of slabs and cobble. But why? One theory is predatory stress. There are a lot of big game fish in the area. We have bass, multiple species of catfish, very large red horse. And when we would flip these rocks in the middle, we would catch these foot and a half long flatheads under these slabs. So they are experiencing predatory stress from being in that larger river system. The water velocity and shear stress is another issue. The tug fork is a very high gradient, flashy stream. When it rains, that stream comes up a lot and it just grinds the bottom. So unless you're burrowing down, going under multiple layers, if you have a flood event, you're going to get crushed. And it's not uncommon for the floodwaters in that area to come up to or even at the bridge that you saw in the previous photos. It's happened multiple times over the past few decades, which is crazy, but it's a very grindy stream on the bottom, so that's probably 2 of the good reasons. For morphometrics, these are fairly basic. These are here if anyone has questions on it, but we're just kind of going to skip this for now. Then for radio tracking, we had 12 crayfish total tracked. Minimum interval movement was 0 meters. Mean interval movement was 9.2 meters, and maximum interval movement was 115 meters. Minimum total movement was 0.3 meters. Mean total movement was 30.8 meters, and maximum total movement was 142. So mixed bag. They do like to move, some not as much as others. And then we were also able to figure out our average transmitter life from this. These are typically used for bats and terrestrial things, but they have been rated and used for crayfish before. But they only have an expectancy of about 48.9 days, which is probably due to A, being in water, and B, being in cold water. It just kind of drains the battery life. And then results and discussion for the relocation success. So overall, we returned 70 animals to the tug fork, which is pretty nice. It's more than we started with. Getting into captive rearing, approximately 500 crayfish were born into captivity. We were not expecting this. A lot of those big females that I brought back early when we were moving them were glared up. They eventually dropped eggs, and those eggs were fertile. We were able to get 30 of them reared and returned to the tug fork, but 30 from 500 is not a great rate of return. So why so few, and was this expected? The answer is yes, it was kind of expected. Young crayfish are very cannibalistic, so it's not uncommon for them to just start attacking each other once they leave mom and basically eat your brother and sister to get stronger. And there's also a high number of failed molts. Crayfish are typically an R-selected species, so you have a lot of young individuals born, and it trickles off over time to where there's only a few that make it to adulthood. So this was expected, but were we to do it again, we can absolutely get those numbers up. We're not expecting to have to do this as part of this project. And in conclusion, we learned a lot about this crayfish from doing this project. It doesn't follow its traditional habitat preference at the site, so it was kind of cool to learn what they do in larger rivers. They are adapted for low flow and drought events, and additional survey methods are useful when sampling larger streams like the Tug Fork. Snorkeling and diving were very effective. You can see their antenna and claws sometimes. And then salvage and relocation efforts for this species worked, and captive rearing for the species worked. So 2 big successes overall. Implications for future work. What we just talked about is huge. The species was very recently listed, and we already have the ability to raise them in captivity and hold them in captivity to get their numbers up. So over time, this could absolutely be something where we can eventually do this and get them delisted. What does this mean for other stream-listed species as well, such as Veteranus? Same thing, sister taxa. It's not out of the realm of possibility to think this could work for other species, so this could be a way in the future to get crayfish species off the endangered species list. Acknowledgements. A lot of people worked on this project and helped me and others out. I would like to take a minute to thank all of you. You were instrumental in getting this done. For the sake of time, I can't mention everyone by name, but if you're on this list, thank you. With that, I will take any questions.